In this video I'm going to share with you the details about the eclipses for 2021. If you're an aspiring astrologer, this is for you. We're going to just go over the eclipses that are going to be occurring in 2021 so that when you're doing forecast work for your clients and you're doing your 12-month look ahead, you can definitely consider these eclipses already. It may seem that it's a little early to be doing an eclipse for 2021. However, if you are a forecasting astrologer, I know by now you're already looking forward for your clients in their forecast work going forward, as I know I am as well. Welcome back. I'm Alison. I'm an astrologer in Vancouver. I like to teach people how to become professional astrologers and how to get their astrology business up and running. And bearing this in mind, a lot of the work I do is helping and guiding astrologers, not only knowing how to read astrology charts, but how to deal with their clients and deal with forecasting and organizing data so that it makes sense, so you're not working out these things for hours and hours or days and days ahead of time. And in this video, we're going to be looking at the eclipses of 2021. I like to get organized as an astrologer early the year before with the forecasting of what's coming up. I generally focus on eclipses, retrogrades and ingresses. So this is the video about the eclipses, and when I have the video for the retrogrades and ingresses, they will be up on this link here. I also am creating the Starzology 2021 astrology guide. I have for the past few years created a Starzology printoutable guide. This is the one for 2020, and it covers the ingresses, retrogrades and eclipses for the year. So typically I am preparing this guide and it will be available later on towards the end of 2020. And that will be a PDF download. And as soon as I have that available, I will put that in the description of this video below. So it depends when you're actually watching this video, whether or not the other videos are ready and whether or not the guide is available too. Anyway, so that's a bit of technicality for you. When I work with eclipses, I always set the chart on 0 Aries because the eclipse will occur at one point no matter where you are on Earth. And if you're an astrologer in Australia or in Europe or in America, you will still have the same chart. You've just got to adjust it for your location. However, the point is that eclipses occur at specific points in the zodiac, say 15 Sagittarius, and if that point is triggered by your chart or your client's charts, that eclipse will affect them. Not all eclipses are created equal. There are different types of eclipses. We have lunar eclipses, we have solar eclipses, and within there are different categories of eclipses, which is a topic for perhaps another video. But the point is that eclipses may occur at south node, north node. They could be total, they could be annular, they could be partial, or whatever. And there are complexities to each eclipse. So you cannot have a one-size-fits-all interpretation for an eclipse. As an astrologer, you need to go beyond that idea and start to appreciate with the different nuances in each eclipse that comes up. So in general, eclipses will occur in one of your houses, and that's the house that will be stimulated by that eclipse. Eclipses are in effect for different time periods, and of the eclipses I'm talking about for 2021, I am going through and explaining that to you. I do have a handy table as well where all these details are on. The table will be forming part of the astrology guide as well later on in the full-blown PDF, but there's an image of it right here for you. Also, what's important with eclipse work is to find out who is the planet that rules the eclipse. So if the eclipse happens in Gemini, it will be Mercury. If the eclipse happens in Sagittarius, it will be Jupiter. And these planets will have an influence over the nature of that eclipse. Let's have a talk about aspect with eclipses. When I'm working with eclipses, I am only using conjunctions and oppositions to the sun and the moon. I do not use trines, squares, sextiles, or what have you. The nature of eclipse in itself is the creation of the syzygy, which is sun, moon, earth, moon, and this one line of 3 planets is all that matters with the eclipses. Now, some astrologers will use other aspects, and certainly if you want to go ahead, knock yourself out. I don't, and I don't do it in my practice as well when I'm forecasting with eclipses too. The idea is you want to understand what is the eclipse saying, what is the nature of the eclipse, is it bringing things, is it taking things away, through what sign is it happening, which node is it happening at, and which planets are connected to that particular eclipse. Finally, we could go on to talk about Saros series, and again that is a video for later on, but what I want to say to you is eclipses are unique and individual. They're not one size fits all. And as an astrologer, it's important that you understand that and try to interpret these eclipses as they're meaningfully through the astrology that you are doing, which you will be presenting through the lens of your very own natal chart. Let's talk quickly about dates for eclipses. If they say there's a date on December the 4th, depends where you are in the world. It could be December the 3rd, it could be December the 5th. You realize that different places on Earth are on different days anyway, as the Earth is rotating. But in general, we are getting these dates that I'm providing you are universal time, or what used to be GMT. Now and again I will reference them to Pacific time because that's my time zone. I live in Vancouver, Canada. Go Canucks. Okay, so having said all that about eclipses, let's now have a look at the eclipses of 2021. So let's get into it. Let's look at the eclipses of 2021, and we're going to be looking at solar and lunar eclipses. So in any year, there are generally 2 eclipse seasons, and 2021 is no different. So there will be 2 eclipse seasons this year for sure, and in 2021 there's going to be 4 eclipses in all over the 2 seasons. So the first eclipse season will have a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse, and we're going to have a closer look at those now. So first up we have the lunar eclipse. This is the first eclipse for 2021, and it occurs on May the 26th at 5 degrees 26 Sagittarius. So what we're saying is there will be a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on May 26th. This is the actual chart for the eclipse, and it's set for 0 Aries because the eclipse occurs at any time around the world. So I am in Vancouver, those are my dates. But the point is that every eclipse is measured by the position of the moon. The eclipse occurs where the moon is in all cases, both solar and lunar. So in this case we can see that the moon is actually at the south node, so this will be a south node lunar eclipse. And if we look at the actual aspects, we are specifically with eclipses, you're looking for conjunctions and oppositions to the sun or the moon, and in this particular chart there isn't any. So for this particular eclipse it's much tighter. It's only the moon and the sun that are really of significance. Now, some astrologers may want to consider squares and triangles and so on, but I never do. Eclipses are very specific blips in the year, and you need to interpret them as such. So what I do is I only consider conjunctions or oppositions to the sun and the moon. I like to use the NASA data sheets. They have a load of information, nasa.com, and it's public domain. And they, for each eclipse that ever is coming up for the next 100 years, they've got what we call eclipse data sheets for each eclipse. So this is the data sheet for the eclipse we're talking about now, which is on May the 26th. And this data sheet for the lunar eclipse has an awful lot of information. We don't need to pay much attention to all of it, but there are 2 main things. The one is where the moon enters the Earth's shadow. That is the red dot, and we'll look at that more closely. And the second part is the actual visibility of the eclipse on the face of the Earth. So these are the 2 bits of information that an astrologer would really be interested in on this data sheet. If we have a closer look at that, we can see here, this is the shadow of the Earth. So what we have here is the red dot is the Earth's umbra. That is the main dark shadow. And then the light grey circle is the Earth's penumbra, which is the slightly less shadow, even though it still is a shadow. It's just the way the light is refracted around the sides of the Earth. And you can see clearly the moon as it's moving in from the top right into position, and it will pass through the shadow exactly in this fashion. And when we're looking up at the moon that night, you will be able to see it, if you can see it from where you are, passing through into the penumbra, ultimately then into the umbra in the full darkness of the Earth's shadow, and then out again. And that will be how the moon will move on eclipse evening. The second interesting thing about the NASA data sheet, thank you NASA, is that they show you where the eclipse will be visible. So the white bits on the map will see the eclipse, and the darker shaded parts will have no view of the eclipse. So with a lunar eclipse, it has to be night when the eclipse happens for you to see it. And if you can see the moon at night, you will be able to see the lunar eclipse. Obviously, if it's clouding or raining, you can't. But if it's broad daylight, you will not see the lunar eclipse. So this map shows you where it will be visible, and in this case it seems to be mainly on Western Australia and in areas like that. So the effect of this particular eclipse will last a particular time, and I do talk about this in another video, that the length of an eclipse. So beginner astrologers seem to think that eclipses last for 6 months from one eclipse to the next, but that's not technically true. You have to analyze each eclipse on its own merit, and this is done by the actual time of the fullness of the eclipse. So this particular eclipse now will be 3 hours and 7 minutes in duration, and that then works to, it will last for 3 months and 3 days. So the length of totality is the length in time of the effects on that eclipse as well. So in this particular eclipse, it will be 3 hours and 7 minutes totality. We get that from the NASA datasheet. Therefore, the effect of this particular eclipse, if it connects to your chart in some way, will be 3 months and 3 days. So the second eclipse of the first season is a solar eclipse. That's going to occur on June the 10th, 2021, and it's going to be at 1945 Gemini. So this is the solar eclipse. It's 2 weeks after the lunar eclipse we just looked at. And on my handy dandy NASA data sheet, which is different now for a solar eclipse, they will actually show you the path of the shadow of the solar eclipse across the face of the Earth. So in this case, we are looking at the dark red. That will be the path of the actual eclipse. You can actually see it's rather going across the top of the Earth. It's very much hardly going to be seen by anybody. It's more towards the north of the actual planet. But that will show you. So this solar eclipse, this is the chart for the solar eclipse. And again, we know that the eclipse occurs where the moon is, and the moon is near the north node. And this eclipse is in Gemini. Therefore, Mercury will rule this actual eclipse, and it is at the north node. Now we see there is a bit of a cluster there, and what we have are a few aspects to this eclipse. So if we again look at for any aspects to this solar eclipse, we see that, of course, that the sun is conjoined the moon, which is when the eclipse occurs, obviously, and then the actual eclipse is conjoined Mercury. So this is in Gemini and conjoined Mercury, which makes it quite a Mercurial and Geminian, dare I say, solar eclipse. Now, how long will this eclipse last? And the actual time of totality is 3 minutes and 51 seconds. So this then relates to 3 months and 25 days after the actual date of the eclipse. Eclipses effects only occur after the eclipse. They do not occur beforehand. So anyone who's got this eclipse that's triggering their chart, it will last for 3 months and 25 days. So let's have a look at the second eclipse season of 2021. So in the second eclipse season, we have a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. And it just so happens that both of these eclipse seasons for 2021 have 2 eclipses in order of lunar solar. It doesn't always happen like that. Each eclipse season can be a combination of solar lunar, lunar solar, or whatever. But for 2021, both seasons are lunar and then solar. So this particular lunar eclipse will occur on November the 19th, 2021, and it's going to be at 2714 Taurus. So because we know that it's in Taurus, we know that Venus rules this eclipse, which is one of the things you need to analyze when you're looking at eclipse interpretations. But let's just get to the chart here. So here is the chart for the actual lunar eclipse. As I've said before, eclipses occur where the moon is, and the moon is actually at the north node. So this is a north node eclipse, and the aspects that we have here is the moon has no conjunctions, but the sun is conjoined Mercury. So again, we've got Mercury in there, and then of course technically Mercury is opposing the moon. Let's not miss that bit out as well. This is also a time where Mercury is prominent within the eclipse for the second season. So there you can see that the moon is opposition to the sun, and those are the main aspects. Again, I don't take into consideration squares and trines and so on with eclipse work. I just find it gives you a tighter reading. So if we now look at the NASA data sheet for this particular lunar eclipse, we can see again where the moon enters the Earth's shadow. We'll have a closer look at that in a moment. and also the eclipse visibility. These are the main two bits of information I like to get from the NASA data sheets. So let's have a look at that. So this is the, again, because it's a lunar eclipse, the moon is entering the Earth's shadow. Now the dark red dot is the umbra of the Earth, that's the darkest bit, and then the penumbra is the light grey shadow. So what happens is the moon is coming along again from the right, it enters into the penumbra, it then skims through into the Earth shadow, the main umbra, and it will go dark at that point, and then it moves on out into the penumbra again and then on its merry way. So if you can see this lunar eclipse that night, you will see that the shadow, the moon will enter the shadow from that side, and that's how you see how the limb of the shadow of the Earth will cross over the face of the moon. And then the second thing that I like to look at on these data sheets is where will the lunar eclipse be visible? Now again, the white bits show where you can see this eclipse. So for us there in North America and me in Vancouver, definitely we are going to be able to see this lunar eclipse that night, whereas most of Central Africa will not be able to see the eclipse, the dark bit, because it's daytime. So you can only see a lunar eclipse at night if you can see the moon. And then we also want to know, well, how long will this particular eclipse last? And its totality is 3 hours 29 minutes. So that's going to be about 3.5 months from the date of the eclipse. The effects of this eclipse will be in force. So if this eclipse contacts your chart in any way, you will feel the effects of this eclipse for around 3.5 months. And then the second eclipse of the second eclipse season, which is actually, of course, the fourth and final eclipse for the year, will be a solar eclipse. This will be on December the 4th, 2021 at 12:22 Sagittarius. Now, again, with the data sheet for the solar eclipse, you can actually see the path that the shadow of the moon will describe across the face of the Earth, and it's right there on that blue section. So this is our NASA data sheet. So this particular eclipse will swoop and the shadow will be cast around the south pole of the Earth. So virtually, again, nobody will really be able to see this. Unless you're an eclipse watcher, let's face it. So this particular solar eclipse now on December, it's on December the 3rd in Vancouver, but it's scheduled for December the 4th. So with the chart, again, we know that the eclipse occurs where the moon is, and in this case, the moon is close to the south node. So that's actually where the eclipse is going to occur. It will be a south node eclipse, and the aspects to the eclipse will be that the moon is actually conjoined Mercury, and of course so is the sun. So there's actually a stellium there in Sagittarius. Once more, Mercury is part of this eclipse complex. There are no oppositions, so we only consider the actual conjunctions of those three planets in Sagittarius and how that actually, what that means and all the rest of it. So here your interpretation is you're going to consider that Jupiter is the ruler of the eclipse, and the fact that Mercury is in Sagittarius, it's weak there, it's in its detriment. So although Mercury has featured in 2 other eclipses this year, this one it's in a weaker position. So full interpretation needs to be created about that. And then we want to consider, well, how long will this particular eclipse last? And it's much shorter, way shorter. The totality is only 1 minute 54 seconds, and this relates to 1 month and 27 days from the date of the eclipse. So if a particular eclipse triggers your chart in some way by connecting to your planets or points, the effect will be a short period of only 1 month and 27 days. So there you have it. We have gone through the 4 eclipses of 2021. We've spoken about the seasons. We've spoken about which node these things are occurring at. We've considered how they're affecting, how the shadows are going across the moon, how the shadows are going across the face of the Earth. We've also considered the duration of these eclipses and how long after the actual eclipse date we can expect the influence of an eclipse to be in effect. Eclipses is an interesting part of astrology. If you are into lunar astrology, it really is something you need to explore further. And there's a lot to eclipses. They are little blips in the year where there's an eclipse happens, and then we've got nothing for 6 months, and then another eclipse happens. And I'll probably be talking a lot more about eclipses in future as well. If any of the eclipses for 2021 are going to contact your chart by conjunction to one of your planets or one of your points, which is your ascendant midheaven, your nodes, your part of fortune, or your vertex, let us know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Alison Price. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.